Albert Einstein once said, "I do not know what weapons World War III will be fought, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones." We live in a world where peace is often professed, but violence is frequently practiced. One of the most disturbing drivers of this violence is the global arms trade, an industry worth trillions that profits from the chaos of war. The global arms trade turns war into a profit-driven industry where human suffering is the hidden cost. Behind every weapon sold are families destroyed, cities shattered, and futures lost. As governments and corporations broker deals in the shadows, they fuel the fire of conflict, with little regard for the innocent lives caught in the crossfire. In this deadly marketplace, the true price is paid in blood and grief, as humanity becomes the ultimate casualty of a business built on war. The story of arms sales is as old as conflict itself. From the earliest wars, nations and empires have traded weapons to strengthen their power and influence. During the two world wars and the Cold War, the arms trade grew rapidly, transforming into a global industry with tentacles stretching into every corner of the globe. Today, it has evolved into a highly sophisticated, multi-billion-dollar enterprise, one in which a few powerful countries dominate the market, dictating who is armed and, in many cases, who lives and dies. Here are the top 5 arms-selling companies that dominate the global defense industry with impressive revenues. Lockheed Martin, over $67 billion, specializing in advanced fighter jets like the F-35 and missile systems. Raytheon Technologies, over $37 billion, known for missile systems like the Patriot and defense electronics. Boeing, over $33 billion, producing military aircraft like the F-A-18 Super Hornet and satellites. Northrop Grumman, over $30 billion, focusing on unmanned systems like the Global Hawk drone and cybersecurity. And BAE Systems, over $24 billion, providing armored vehicles and naval ships. But herein lies the dilemma. Profit often outweighs principle. These companies and the governments that support them justify arms sales as economic necessities, creating jobs, boosting economies, and maintaining national security. Yet, behind every transaction is an unspoken cost, the human toll on those living in the war-torn countries where these weapons are used. So what motivates them? Arms sales aren't just about economics. They are deeply entwined with geopolitics. Nations don't just sell weapons for profit. They sell them to strengthen alliances, gain influence, and exert control on regions critical to their strategic interests. Consider the arms race in the Middle East. The US and its allies supply weapons to countries like Saudi Arabia, ostensibly to maintain security. Meanwhile, Russia and China back their own allies such as Syria and Iran. The result is a geopolitical chess game where the people living in these conflict zones pay the heaviest price. The weapons sold in the name of security end up prolonging wars, fueling proxy battles, and destabilizing entire regions. So what are the consequences of the arms trade? The global arms trade has devastating consequences, fueling conflicts and enabling violence. In Yemen, US and European-made weapons have contributed to airstrikes, killing over 25,000 civilians, with 377,000 total deaths by 2021. Imagine a child in who, after a drone strike, is left without a home or a family. Russian arms in Syria have supported the Assad regime, leading to over 500,000 deaths and displacing nearly 12 million people. In Libya, weapons from France and Russia have fueled ongoing conflicts and terrorism across North Africa. After the US withdrawal from Afghanistan, over $7 billion in military equipment was left behind, now in the hands of the Taliban. In South Sudan, arms from China and Ukraine have fueled one of the deadliest modern conflicts, with over 400,000 deaths since 2013. Small arms, too, are a significant global issue, with 1 billion firearms in circulation worldwide, and 10 to 20% of this linked to illegal arms trade. fueling violence in criminal organizations and insurgencies. In Mexico, over 250,000 people have died in cartel violence, much of it driven by illegal US-sourced weapons. Once sold, arms often resurface in future conflicts. For instance, ISIS captured US weapons left behind by recruiting Iraqi forces in 2014, using them to expand across Iraq and Syria. In Somalia, weapons intended for the government frequently end up with the Al-Shabaab, perpetuating one of the world's longest insurgencies. The arms trade, while framed to maintain stability, often does the opposite, deepening insecurity, spreading chaos, and fueling conflicts for years to come. So where is a moral responsibility? The arms trade raises profound ethical questions about our collective humanity. International law, including the Arms Trade Treaty, exists to regulate the sale of weapons and prevent them from being used for human rights abuses. But too often, these laws are ignored or circumvented by nations eager to sell weapons to the highest bidder. And when these weapons are used to commit atrocities, there is little accountability. So who is responsible? The company that made the weapon, the government that sold it, or the nation that used it? Is there a framework for arms sales? The world does have frameworks in place to regulate arms sales. The Arms Trade Treaty, for instance, seeks to ensure that weapons do not fall in the wrong hands. However, enforcement is weak and loopholes abound. For example, despite international agreements, countries like Saudi Arabia have faced accusations of using arms supplied by the US and the UK in ways that violate human rights without facing significant consequences. Too many nations, especially the largest arms exporters, are reluctant to fully comply with these agreements. For them, the financial and political rewards of arms sales often outweigh the ethical cost. This must change. Around the world, advocates like Jody Williams, Oscar Arias, and Pope Francis, and many others have stood firmly against the destructive impact of arms sales, arguing that profiting from war fuels global instability, prolongs suffering, and undermines human rights. These figures, alongside organizations such as Amnesty International and Campaign Against Arms Trade, highlight the ethical and moral contradictions of selling weapons to conflict zones and authoritarian regimes. They emphasize that diplomacy, peace building, and investment in social development should replace the arms trade, which only deepens violence and human misery. As Ban Ki-moon famously said, the world is overarmed and peace is underfunded. A truth we must confront to build a more just and peaceful world. Supporting global disarmament efforts like the campaign to ban landmines and investing in humanitarian organizations can further mitigate the consequences of war. By envisioning a future where resources are allocated to education, healthcare, and renewable energy rather than military expenditures, we can foster a more peaceful and equitable world. We can now see that each weapon sold risks human life, as evidenced by the humanitarian disaster in Yemen, where over 25,000 civilians have died due to US and European arms sales. We must demand that our governments prioritize peace over profit, holding the arms industry accountable for its role in perpetuating violence. Civil society has a crucial role in this movement. Grassroots campaigns like the Campaign Against Arms Trade in the UK have successfully challenged arms sales policies. Together, let us advocate for a future where human dignity and safety take priority over corporate profits, ensuring that our collective voices resonate for a more peaceful world. While the business of war is thriving, we have the power to reshape our future. The choices we make, the policies we advocate for, and the values we uphold can lead us to a world where peace is far more profitable than war. And once again, in the words of Albert Einstein, peace cannot be kept by force. It can only be achieved by understanding. Thus, it is time for us as global citizens to rethink the arms trade and work collectively towards a safer, more just, world